So this tutorial video is for people who wound up taking the digital storytelling workshop and either didn't have time to finish their final digital story, or they're looking to maybe brush up on their skills a bit and try to make one on their own. So this is a tutorial on how to use Adobe Premiere in order to create a digital story. So we're not going to go over the digital storytelling process. That's something you've already gone over. But we are going to go over a little bit of file management. It's very important that you have your files in the correct place. If you don't, Adobe Premiere will not know where they're at. It's a non-destructive editor, so it's not going to be manipulating any of the files, original files, but it does need to know exactly where they're at. So if you haphazardly save them on your lab computer and don't have them in a correct folder, and then unplug your USB drive, you may not have access to those images anymore, and the computer, the program will put up a media unfound placard instead of actually finding the image or the audio. So what we do ahead of time is to make sure that we are very organized with our files. I'm going to open this is my Walden, this is the name of my project, Walden. Now you'll be saving this onto your flash drives because it's just much easier to save there and safer to save there in case the computer crashes. Also, you can move from lab computer to lab computer. As you can see here, we have two folders. The first folder I keep my audio, the second I keep my images. Now, a reason I split these up is because if I were to start throwing everything in here, I may lose my audio in here. I may not be able to find it as easily, so I want to make sure that they're separate. Inside my audio, I have two pieces of audio. Now, you may have multiple pieces of audio, but I have the recorded script, and I also have the score. Now, you may have many pieces of score, and you may also have a couple of different scripts that you want to listen to see which one is best. I only have one. In my images folder, I have all the images that I wish to put into my piece, and we're going to be able to insert both of these inside of the Premiere as we work. So we're going to open Premiere. When I click on Premiere, it should bring up a welcome menu. Now yours may vary and be a little different. Mine is the latest version. Yours might not be the exact latest version, but regardless, you'll be able to select project here, or you'll be able to select new project at the top. So either one. We're going to select a new project. Now it's going to ask a bunch of questions that we don't have to answer because this is all for video, so we don't really have to worry about this. All we're going to do is select the location and the name of it. So we're going to call it Digital Story. We're also going to select the location. So we're going to go to Browse, and we're going to put it, you would be putting this on your flash drive. I am going to be putting it on my desktop. So I select the Walden folder, which is the name of my project, and I select it, and now it's selected. Now all I have to do is hit OK, and it's going to open up the classic view of Premiere. Over here is our media browser. Here's our source window, our program window, and our timeline window. I'll explain these in 1 second. So let's import our media to start. You can double click here, and it will open up my Walden folder. See, it's already set for that. I'm going to select my my images, my whole folder of images, and just put them right in. I'm going to select Import, and it will import all my images. And you can see it's all set in a bin already on its own. If I hit this little triangle next to it, it will open up each one of the images. To view each one of these images, all I have to do is double click it, and it will show up on the source window. So you can see it's set up on the source window here. If I click each one, it will show on the source window. So now we want to import our audio. Now to do that, we can, if we like, just go and select the audio and drag it in. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to highlight both pieces of audio, and I can just select and drag it directly in. Now you see these icons are very different than this icon. This is an image icon. This looks like a waveform. That's a sound icon. So to get started, we want to create a sequence. The first thing we're going to do is go up to File, New Sequence, and we're going to create a sequence. Now we want to make sure that it is AVCHD 720p. You can go up to 1080p if your images are very large, but I prefer 720p. There's no reason to go any larger. I don't think that there's any appreciable difference, but if you want to go up with a higher range, you can. This is going to produce a nice movie for YouTube, so this would be the sequence settings I suggest. We hit OK, and it creates a new sequence. So now, since our actual digital story is based specifically on the story that we told, the script of the story that we told, we're going to start with that script. That's going to be the meter to decide how long our piece is and the pacing of our piece. So we're going to get started editing that script. Now, you may have a few gaffes in your script, and that's exactly what I have here. I have a digitally recorded script that I did with a voice actor, and it has a few gaffes in it that we can edit, so you can see how that's done. Now, I'm going to left click, and drag, and you see a little blue or a little green box shows up. This is our audio file. I click. There it is. Now I'm going to move it up just so we can see it a little better. I moved it up into A1. So now we have this box. This box is 2 minutes and 43 seconds long. You can tell because it starts at 00 and ends, here's the ending of it, 2 minutes and 43 seconds. But we can't really tell. If we were to edit this, we were to try to cut this, we wouldn't be able to see the waveform, so we wouldn't be able to cut very easily. So what we're going to do is we're going to hover over this portion. We know it's in track A1. We're going to hover over A1. We're going to scroll wheel so that we can see our waveform. Now again, our waveform is very crunched up, so we want to make sure that we zoom in on our waveform. To do that, you press the plus key on the keyboard, and as I press this plus key, you'll see that this portion of the timeline, this timeline here, will get smaller and smaller. Right now we're at 2 minutes. Now we're at 1 minute. Now we're at 30 seconds. Now we're at 15 seconds. And as you can see, it's much more pronounced. What you'll be able to see in between each one of these is the pauses in between some words and mostly sentences. So we're going to play this and we're going to edit it as we work our way through. So I'm going to hit play. Play is spacebar. It's also L on your keyboard.
And let us not forget Henry David Thoreau, whom any discussion of simple living must consider. Simplify, simplify, Thoreau counseled over.
So we're already at our first gaffe. I just pressed K to stop. You can also press the space bar again to stop. That was our first gaffe. We'll listen to it one more time.
Thoreau counseled over a century ago.
So he recovers, but there is a gaffe. So what we're going to do is we're going to move our playhead to where we want to cut. Once our playhead is over where we want to cut, we're going to go over to these tools here and select the razor tool, pressing C or selecting the razor tool here. We can tell it's selected because it's colored blue. We're going to hover over, and as we hover over, it'll automatically snap to where that playhead is. All I have to do is click it, and it has created a cut there, and you can see that there's two specific pieces now. Now we have to go in and cut here because we want to cut out this little part where he makes the gaffe. I'm going to cut it first, and I'll play it to show you that it's the gaffe. We're going to go again over, select the razor tool by either pressing C or selecting it on the toolbar. We clicked again, and now we have an individual piece here that we're going to cut out. Let's listen to it one more time. Make sure it's the piece we want to remove.
Thoreau counseled over. Thoreau.
It is. Now I can delete it if I like. I can press the delete key. Now, if I don't want that deleted, I can always hit Command Z or Control Z on a PC, and that will bring it back. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to cover it over. I'm just going to drag this, and I'm just going to highlight right over it, and it'll automatically snap and just completely eat it up, so you won't have to worry about it. Let's listen to what it sounds like with the edit.
Simplify, Thoreau counseled over a century ago. Although his motivation was not religious, it was nevertheless an attempt to get at the essence of living, to clear the smoke which obscures it. The mass of men, he says in his famous observation, lead lives of quiet desperation. Thoreau takes most of his book, Walden, to examine life and search for the truth of this statement. I went to the woods because I wished to live deliberately, to front only the essential facts of life. Let me do that over again. I got caught in the page turning. Thoreau takes most of his.
So we know that he recovers here, but he did have a gaffe in there, a nice big gaffe, so we want to make sure that we delete it. We're going to hover our playhead over where we want to make the first cut, and that's right where he's going to fix his problem, and that's right at 58 seconds. Now we're going to scroll back to find where he says Thoreau. Let's find that.
Lead lives of quiet desperation. Thoreau takes most of his...
So we know that this whole portion here, now I don't have to have the playhead here to cut. I can cut wherever I like. You see that little gray line is exactly where it's going to cut. I'm just going to cut right there. This whole piece we know is garbage. We know that this is not going to go in our final piece. So we can either click and drag over there, or we can delete it. I'm going to hit the delete key. It's highlighted right now. I'm going to hit the delete key. I'm going to zoom out just a touch so I can see both ends of this, and I'm going to left click and just drag it. Now as I get close, it automatically snaps into place. That's because this little snap is on, that magnet is on. That's going to snap it into place every time, and it'll be perfect. So let's listen.
Of quiet desperation. Thoreau takes most of his book, Walden.
Now there's a tiny little breath in there that I want to get rid of. It sounds a little weird. It sounds like he's taking 2 breaths. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to zoom in, and as you can see, it definitely looks like he's taking 2 breaths. There's one here and one here. So I'm just going to click and drag it over just a touch, and then he should just have 1 breath.
Thoreau takes most of his book, Walden.
Now you can get you can edit this as tightly as you like. I'm going to leave this as is. We know that there's probably some more gaffes. I'm zooming out here by pressing minus key. As we zoom out, we see that this is the whole piece. The whole piece is now, let's presume it's all edited, but we want to move it over a little bit to start our piece because we're going to put some music in, and we don't want the person to start talking right away, right as the music starts. We want to give it a few seconds. So what I'm going to do over here is go over to the Track Select Forward tool. As you can see, it's right below the selector tool. I'm going to highlight it so now it's blue. And wherever I click on this, it selects everything after the arrows to the right of the arrow. So if I click here, it selects everything there. But if I select at the very beginning, it selects everything, the entire track. Now I can click and drag that, and I can see a little bit where it's going to drag it. I want it to start at 6 seconds. Right there, it says 6 seconds in that little gray box there. That's going to be perfect. So we're going to start it at 6 seconds. So now our audio is sort of set, but we need to set up our score. So let's drag our score into the piece. Again, this box is a little small to see, so I'm hovering over the track. It's an A2. I'm going to hover over the beginning, not over here, but actually over the where the track selections are over here, and I'm going to hover over the track and scroll wheel to make it a little larger. Now it's scroll wheeled up. Now we want to listen to it. Now it's going to be a little loud, the score is, so we're going to have to make it softer so that we're going to listen to it so you can see how to do that.
And let us not forget Henry David Thoreau.
So it's a little loud on his voice. We want to make sure that that's not the case. So we're going to zoom in. And you see this little line here? We're going to actually manipulate this line. This is the amplitude line of this particular score. To do that, all I have to do is select this pen tool. If I select the pen tool over on the side, I can select what we call control points, and that will tell the computer when to turn it down and when to turn it up. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it turn down now. And so as I set it to turn down, I'm going to create these control points. The first control point is where I want the computer to start turning it down, where I want it to start changing. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to select right before he starts speaking to start turning it down. As I select, you see there's a blue dot there. Now I'm not going to manipulate this particular blue dot. I'm going to manipulate the second blue dot that I create right now, where I want it to stop going, the volume to stop going down. So I click, I create another blue dot, and as it's blue, I can hover over it. You see, as I'm hovered over it, there's a little white circle next to the pen tool. If I left click and drag that, I can pull down on my mouse towards me, and I can manipulate this, and I'm going to make it go to about -12. So what it's going to do is it's going to do what we call ducking. It's going to start out loud, then it'll duck under his voice. Let's hear what that sounds like.
And let us not forget Henry David Thoreau, whom any...
So you can see it's now not interfering with his voice. It sounds like a score, and it should suit our purposes perfectly. Now we're going to go to the end of the piece because we know that at the end we want to have a little bit of time for credits. So what we're going to do is first we're going to select the very end of the piece, and this looks like a great place to stop it. So I'm going to actually cut here, and we see that the piece continues on for a few more minutes, but I'm just going to delete it. I'm just going to get rid of it. And so now we have our piece ends nice and slowly, but it's probably going to be a little too soft. We'd like it to swell at the end under the credits.
My door to the pond side.
So I'd like it to start getting louder right about there. I'm going to go back up to the pen tool, hover over this line. This is where I want the computer to start. making it louder. I'm going to hover a little bit farther down the piece here, a little farther down the timeline, and I'm going to click and drag this up to the top. And it's going to go, I want to go to 0 dB. I never want to go over 0 if I can avoid it. So now it's at 0 dB. Now I want it to fade out at the end. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select where I want the computer to start making it change. And I'm going to go all the way to the end, select, and drag it all the way out. So I want it to stop making a change there. Basically, it's going to be a nice, slow fade out. So let's hear what that sounds like.
From my door to the pond side.
And so you can try to manipulate this as best you want. You can make it sound how you want it to sound. Try to change that fade a little. I don't like that little tiny whistle at the end, so I'm going to make it fade out just a little differently. Not bad. We'll make it one more time so we know it's going to fade out. There we go. Completely faded out. This is a song by Kevin MacLeod, by the way, called The Parting, that I'm using. It's a royalty-free song. You can find all his stuff at incompetech.com. He has tons of royalty-free stuff. So as we have our piece sort of set here, all the audio for our piece set, what we want to do is make sure that we can't manipulate this stuff anymore, because if we were to click and drag, I'm going to make these a little smaller. All I'm doing is hovering and scroll wheeling down now, and it's making these smaller. If I were to click, I can click and drag these and move these around. I don't want that to happen. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the locks here on the side, and what that does is lock these tracks. Now if I were to try to select this, I can't actually select it and move it. I just can't now. So now I know that my audio is 100% set. I want to move my images in and start manipulating them. So we're going to start with Henry's face. That's going to be the first image we're going to click and drag, and we're going to put it right at the beginning of the timeline. Now remember what we said earlier. Each one of these pieces, as we set them down, it's going to be showing you how long it's on for a particular amount of time from left to right. So each one, as I set it down, it will stay on for, the computer sets it, I think, for a set time of 5 seconds. That may not match our purposes very well. We're going to have to be manipulating the ends of these to match where we have natural breaks and where we want the images to change in our story. So what we're going to do is we're going to zoom in again. I'm using the plus key to zoom in, and we're going to start dragging in a few different images, the images that we know we want to put in. And so I like this image for the second image, so we'll put this image for the second image. We'll drag that in. And then for the third image, I'm going to use this piece here. It's Curb Market. We're going to drag this one in. So we have 3 images that we're going to manipulate. Let's find where each one of them starts and stops. Now this is how I would approach this. What I would do is I would make sure your timeline, each image or each black space, whatever you want, white space, etc., is affixed to start before you start manipulating your effects. So work your timeline all the way through, make sure all your images are set, and then you can go back and manipulate each one of these images and do pans and zooms and fades, etc. So we're going to start with Henry's face, and we're going to just find where we want it to start and where we want it to stop.
And let us not forget Henry David Thoreau, whom any discussion of simple living must consider.
Now at Simplify, I want to make sure that I have that image of the forest. So I'm going to just drag this. I can see from the waveform here where the break is in his voice. So all I have to do is just hover over the end of it. And if I hover over the end of it, it brings up this particular tool. This will extend it. If I left click and drag, it will extend the time of this particular image all the way until the pause, until where I want it to stop. And now we want this other one to pick right up. If I hover and drag, click and drag, it will then snap into place. And so now we know that this is the one we want for this piece.
Simplify, Thoreau counseled over a century ago. Although his motivation was not religious, it was nevertheless an attempt to get at the essence of living, to clear the smoke which obscures it. The mass of men.
So we know that we want on the mass of men to have this interesting image of the Curb Street Market here, or Broad Street Market, the Curb Market here. We want to make sure that that's where it starts with massive men. So what we're going to do is we're going to select and have this image play throughout this entire piece, and as he says massive men, it changes.
Here's it. The mass of men, he says in his famous observation, lead lives of quiet desperation. Thoreau takes most of his book, Walden, to examine life and search for the truth of this statement.
So we'll make sure that this piece goes all the way to statement. There we go. And so now we have our first three in. Let's presume that we have all the rest of our timeline filled in. And so now we know at each piece, each image is exactly where we want it to be, but now we have to manipulate the images. So in order to do that, we're going to do what we call panning and zooming. Be sure to save your project throughout. It just auto-saved for me, but you want to make sure you save your project throughout. Control S or Command S will save your project. It may ask you initially where you want to save your project as. Just make sure you save it as you work through, because this program, just like any other, is sometimes prone to crashing. So we want to start by manipulating the image. Now you see this image is way too big. It's just sort of zoomed in on his face way too close, and we want to make sure we start out as far away as we can with the picture bounding on the top and on the bottom, but still having these black bars on the side. So we want to be able to zoom this out. Now there's several ways to do this. The first thing I'm going to do is put it up in this source window. To do that, I double click on the timeline image and it puts it in the source window. I want to click on this Effect Controls tab. This is how we're going to be manipulating the image. You can also manipulate the image by double clicking the image here, and it will create these little handles. You see these little handles on the edge? And then you can just select it that way and move it and manipulate it just like you would any other image in any other image editor. I can select it this way, or if I like, and this is, you're going to have to go to this tab anyway for motion. You're going to click on this motion. You can also manipulate it using these. Now, if I want to manipulate the scale, I hover over, and if I want it to be, say, I can click on it once, left click on it once, it'll bring up a box that I can type in. So if I want it to be, say, 75, I can hit that. That's a percentage scale, and it will turn it into a 75. Now you see that's a little too big. We know that 53 is good, so we can just put 53 in if we like, and it will then put it back to where it was. We can also left click and then hold down, and then I can move my mouse to the left or right, and it will manipulate the size of it. It'll just basically make it larger or smaller as I work my way through. Can also manipulate where it sits by double clicking on it and moving it around, right? If I want, I just hit Command Z to move it back to where it was. Or I can do the same thing here. I can left click over these and then manipulate these back and forth. Now I know this was at 640, so I'm going to type 640 in. It's perfectly centered onto my screen. So what we want to do is we want to put this at the this playhead at the very beginning of the frame. Now this is how I do it. You can make it like focus on his face initially and then start moving. I like it to start moving right as the transition happens. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to find the very first frame of this, and I did that by pressing the up arrow. Now you can also move this back and forth using your playhead, moving the playhead back and forth if you like. And then if you want to nudge the playhead over 1 or 2 frames, you can press 1 frame over by pressing the right or left arrow keys. Now we're going to put it at the beginning. We can move it right or left. It's going to go black here. We want it to be on his face. This is the very first frame where Henry David Thoreau comes in. This is important. We're going to hit position and scale. This is where we're telling, just like we moved the keyframes down here in the audio, this is the exact same thing here. We're telling the computer, hey, this is where we want it to start changing. Now we want it to stop changing at the end of the image. So we're going to go to the end of the image. We're going to nudge it to find the very last frame of this image. And now we're going to zoom in on Henry's face. And so I'm going to zoom in just a touch. Now, as you can see, his forehead's out, but we want to pull it down a little so his forehead is not his forehead is not off screen. We know this is 640. I manipulated the wrong number. Here is this is evidently the x-axis, and this is the y-axis. I'm going to then drag down just a bit and make sure Henry's in there. We'll cut off a touch of his beard. And so it's going to start on Henry's face far away, and it's going to zoom in, and this is what it's going to look like. I'm going to put the playhead at the beginning, and you can see.
And let us not forget Henry David Thoreau, whom any discussion of simple living must consider. Simplify.
All right, so now let's get started with the second image. I'm going to double click. It will then show up in our source window. We're going to hit Effect Controls. Now I want to go to the very first frame. I'll press the up key, and it will take me to the first frame of this image. I'm going to select the motion. I'm going to hit position and scale. This is telling the computer where I want it to start changing. Now I want to manipulate the scale just a touch, not too much. I want to zoom in on this portion here. So I'm going to manipulate the scale a bit, and I'm going to manipulate it so it looks like it's sort of the path is working its way down, and we're going to zoom in on that path as this clip plays out. So now we're going to go to the end. I can press the down arrow key, and it will go to the next clip. I want to press the left key once, and it will take me to the final frame of the previous image. I want to manipulate this image to zoom in, so I'm going to left click and hold and drag this in. And then I'm going to move this up just a little. I'd like that to be a little more centered, so I'm going to move it up just a touch. And I'm going to move it over just a touch, and there we go. Now it's nice and centered as we work our way through. Let's watch this piece.
Simplify, simplify, Thoreau counseled over a century ago. Although his motivation was not religious, it was nevertheless an attempt to get at the essence of living, to clear the smoke which obscures it.
Now you don't want to move these too much. If you move them too much, your audience could get a little seasick. That one was a little slow, so I can go back and manipulate it if I want to make it even more drastic, which is what I'm going to do. So I go back to the last frame again, and I want to zoom in just a touch more because I think it can use it. Why don't we zoom into like 100% or 97% and see what happens? Let's see what that looks like instead.
Simplify, simplify.
See, so now it's not as gradual and it looks like it's moving a little quicker, a little more visual interest. So now let's go to the final piece. I'm going to do on this one, I'm going to do a pan, and I'm going to make it look so that it looks like it starts on one side and it just pans all the way across the street. So what we're going to do is we're going to find the very beginning frame, which we have here. We're going to select it to get it up in the window, hit Effect Controls, Motion, tab down, we're going to hit Position and Scale, and now we're going to scale it so that these two white bars are gone. So if I scale it down, you can see it's going to zoom. We don't want that. We want to zoom in until these two white bars are gone. Now the white bars are gone, but we'd like it to start on one side and sort of pan its way over. And I'm going to manipulate it using this piece today. I'm going to manipulate it here using the program sequence window instead. So we're moving it over. We're going to move it over to where these young men are hanging out on the step. That's where it starts moving. Now we want to make it stop moving at the other side. So we're going to press the up arrow, get to the final frame, and we're going to just drag it across so we can see this mass of men as it works its way across and what he says. So let's see what this looks like. Now it's going to look like the camera is panning directly across the street.
The mass of men, he says in his famous observation, lead lives of quiet desperation. Thoreau takes most of his book, Walden, to examine life and search for the truth of this statement.
So there you go. We have our we have everything sort of set up. What looks like, let's presume that we're finished with our movie. We want to add a credit, so let's add some credits here. We'll go up to Title. We'll go to New Title. Now, default still, we'll put up an image, just a flat image of words, whatever words are. And then you could also do a default roll. Now, this is like when you're watching a movie, and at the end, your credits roll. We're going to do that. We're going to hit default roll. Now, it's going to create a title sequence. It's going to be called Title 1. We can name it whatever we like. I don't really care what it's called, so I'm going to hit OK. Now, as you can see, it's showing me where the playhead is, and if I were to type in it, it would show me what it would look like if it were laid over this particular image. Well, we're not going to do that. We're going to move it over so it's actually black space there. We're already selected on text here, so we're just going to select text. Now, this is just like a lot like Photoshop. You can select different types of fonts. You can select different colors. You can make them bigger, larger, etc. I'm just going to go with the default image. I'm going to start typing in some credits. All right, so I entered in a few things here and there. In order to make this roll, it will automatically roll, but what I wanted to do is start off screen. So I'm going to hover over here where it says Roll Crawl Options at the top. It's the second icon at the very top. What I want it to do is start off screen. And so now it'll start off screen and work its way on. We're going to hit OK. And now all I have to do is just close this window, and it's created this title down here in my media browser. So all I have to do is click and drag that. And as I click and drag that, I can put it right at the end, and we can watch what this title screen looks like. So there you go. We have our movie done. Let's presume that it's completed. All the images are in, everything's set up. Let's say we want to do one more thing though. Let's try to make a couple fades here in between these two images. Now this is super easy to do on Premiere. If I highlight and select everything, I can just press Control D, and it will then create fades.
And let us not forget
for each piece.
Must consider. Simplify.
And so each piece now has a fade on it.
The
You can select those individually. Remember that there's an effects folder here for video transitions that you can select a bunch of different effects here. I'm just choosing the very basic cross dissolve, but you can do a whole bunch of different other ones. Just remember that understated is always better than overstated. You certainly don't want things flying across the screen PowerPoint style. So we finished up. We want to actually export this, so we're going to go up to File, Export. We want to select the actual timeline first, and then go to File, Export Media. Now, when this window pops up, what we want to do is we want to select entire sequence. Sometimes you can put in and out points here and it won't export the whole thing. We want to make sure the entire sequence is exported. We want to go to H.264, and then we want to scroll all the way down to YouTube 720 HD. Now, you can make this into whatever kind of codec you like. I find that this particular codec is very useful and works very well, especially for YouTube movies. I want to change the output name. It's going to be going into Walden, but I want to call it Final Story or whatever you want to call it. This is your own choice, but just remember you want to check to see where it's going first. So you want to click on that blue line to make sure it's going in the correct folder. Now I know it's going to Desktop Walden. You want to make sure it's either going to your flash drive or to someplace on the hard drive where you know it's going to be and you'll be able to save it. I just leave all the rest of the defaults here and I just hit export and it gets to work. So now our piece is finished. We're going to hide this so you can see here is the piece right here, and if I press play button,
and let us not forget Henry.
It's completely set up. You can drag that right into YouTube, select it that way. So that hopefully is a good start for you to try to manipulate and work on a new digital story or the digital story you didn't get a chance to finish in the digital storytelling workshop. I'm always available for comments, so if you have any comments or questions, you can always contact me either through this YouTube video or my information on how to contact me is on the bottom of this YouTube video in the actual comment in the description section, so you can contact me that way. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope that this is helpful, and if you thought it was helpful, please like it. Thank you so much.